Hotel Hell is packed with some of the most jaw-dropping, outrageous moments in reality TV. With Chef Ramsey at the helm, no hotel is spared from his fiery critiques and shocking discoveries. From bizarre, unappetizing menu choices to owners in total denial about their failing businesses, each episode is a roller coaster of chaos. Juniper Hill Inn was once a beautiful hotel located in Vermont, known for its antique-filled decor and charming exterior.
Original works of art and antiques, all museum quality.
From the outside, it appeared to be a luxurious and ideal getaway. However, behind the facade, the inn was a different story altogether. The inn was owned by Robert, a man whose extravagant lifestyle far exceeded his financial means, and his business partner, Ari. Despite being heavily in debt, Robert lived lavishly, hosting friends for free stays and meals. This reckless behavior played a significant role in the inn's eventual downfall.
I always thought that you should live with nice things if you can afford them.
This looks good there, Robert.
From the outset, there were signs that things were not right at Juniper Hill Inn. The hotel charged steep prices with a minimum 2-night stay costing $350 per night. Yet, despite these high rates, the business struggled to stay afloat. Robert admitted that they were fortunate to make $15,000 a month, yet they were losing $200,000 annually. The situation was dire, and it was evident that Robert's poor management and refusal to face reality were driving the inn into financial ruin. Instead of tightening the budget and focusing on the inn's critical issues, Robert chose to spend his money on his passion for antiques, investing his entire life savings into decorating the inn rather than addressing its fundamental problems.
Where's all this stuff from?
The situation caught the attention of Chef Gordon Ramsay, a renowned expert in turning around failing businesses. Upon arriving at Juniper Hill Inn, Chef Ramsay was initially impressed by the hotel's beauty. However, his enthusiasm quickly diminished when he found the front door locked. Once inside, the issues were immediately apparent. The room assigned to Chef Ramsay smelled like sewage, having not been used for 4 months, forcing him to request a different room. Even something as simple as ordering lunch proved to be a challenge, as the kitchen was only open for breakfast and dinner unless guests specifically requested a meal during the day.
I have crap in that room, I can't believe it. And the rooms are gorgeous, and yet how could you have a room?
One of the most alarming issues was how Robert treated his staff. Barbara, an employee, confided in Chef Ramsay that she was rarely paid on time or correctly. This mistreatment was a recurring theme at Juniper Hill Inn, Robert's selfishness and disregard for the people who kept his business running. He refused to pay tips and even struggled to pay wages, yet he had no qualms about spending thousands of dollars on antiques. The staff, frustrated and overworked, were underpaid and struggling, but Robert seemed completely indifferent to their difficulties.
True that Robert takes a percentage of the tips?
Yes.
He does.
The restaurant at Juniper Hill Inn was no better. The menu had no prices, and Robert explained that they offered a fixed-price menu of $59 for 3 courses. Chef Ramsay's experience with the food was disastrous. The crab cakes were small and had an unpleasant soapy taste, while the lamb, which required an additional $15 supplement, was raw and overly sweet.
It's not even cooked properly. Rest it and take that off.
Unsurprisingly, the locals avoided the restaurant, but Robert seemed unconcerned. He believed that the locals were not the right clientele for his establishment, highlighting his out-of-touch and self-centered mindset.
If you're not happy with your work environment, you should leave.
The disorganization extended to the dinner service, where Robert and Ari seated all the guests at once, overwhelming the kitchen staff.
Chef, I'm making a change on 21.
Write it down, don't tell me, just write it down.
The result was burnt food and a disastrous service. In response to the chaos, Ari attempted to assert himself as the boss, but Chef Ramsay quickly pointed out that Ari had no authority until he started paying the staff properly.
If you're not happy with your work environment, you should leave.
Robert's reaction was dismissive, telling the staff they were free to leave if they were unhappy, further revealing his selfishness and disregard for their concerns. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Chef Ramsay knew that drastic measures were needed. Despite Chef Ramsay's efforts, the positive changes were short-lived. The story of Juniper Hill Inn serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of selfishness and poor management in business. Despite its potential and beauty, the inn was ultimately doomed by Robert's refusal to prioritize the needs of his business and staff over his extravagant desires. Chef Ramsay's next visit takes him to Towns Inn in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, a historic yet dilapidated establishment owned by Jason and Nana. The couple bought the inn in 2007 as an investment and as a way to provide Jason's mother, Karen Townsend, with a project to occupy her time during retirement.
Business owner.
Karen, as a businesswoman, she don't have no experience.
Karen, a former teacher, had intended to use the inn to keep herself busy, but it had instead become more of a personal playground than a serious business venture. She slept in her office, and the entire inn was filled with random items, from eerie dolls to outdated loaves of bread. Upon arrival, Chef Ramsey is immediately struck by the clutter and how unprofessional everything appears.
Baskets.
Don't even get me started on those damn baskets. There's baskets everywhere.
Chef Ramsey's stay at Town's Inn begins on a rough note when he is shown to the Potomac Room, which is named after the local river. The room is in terrible condition. The ceiling is cracked, the curtains are barely hanging because the rod is too short, and the cupboard is locked because it contains Karen's clothes.
Look, that's there.
And this has been here since 2007.
When Chef Ramsey requests the key to the cupboard, Karen initially refuses to give it to him. After some back and forth, she reluctantly agrees to open it. When Chef Ramsey inspects the contents, he discovers that the wall behind the cupboard is rotten. To make matters worse, Karen admits that she has been using Brillo pads to fill holes in the walls as a makeshift solution.
My wardrobe full of all your clothes.
I can cover it up, but
the situation deteriorates further when Chef Ramsey heads to the kitchen, where he discovers 5 microwaves and just 2 cooks boiling pre-prepared burgers, a practice that horrifies him. When he confronts Karen about the state of the kitchen, she doesn't see anything wrong with it. However, what truly infuriates Chef Ramsey is the overall lack of cleanliness in the inn. Concerned for his safety, he decides to use a bacteria test kit to assess the hygiene levels.
To get a good reading, rub the swab underneath the mat.
The results of the bacteria test are shocking. Chef Ramsey begins the test in the Potomac Room, where he is supposed to sleep. The carpet, which at first glance looks dirty but not disastrous, gives a reading of 803. To put this in perspective, a reading of 30 is considered an acceptable level of cleanliness. The inn's carpet is not just a little dirty, it poses a serious health hazard.
It's just the smell from here. The stains everywhere.
Chef Ramsey is visibly disgusted and frustrated by the test results. He knows Karen has been in denial about the state of her inn, but the bacteria readings are undeniable proof that the situation is out of control. When he confronts Karen about the test results, Chef Ramsey does not hold back. He tells her that the carpet is filthy, not because of a few bikers or hikers passing it through, but due to years of neglect. He challenges everyone to guess what the bacteria readings might be, but Karen immediately gets defensive. She tries to shift the blame, insisting that the dirt and grime are the result of customers, not her failure to maintain the property.
Yeah, I know that. I know that, Chef.
So why have you become like a zombie and following her motion?
Chef Ramsey, however, counters by revealing that there is human fecal matter on the floor. A staff member's reaction to this revelation is shocking, but Karen remains defensive, unwilling to accept responsibility. Chef Ramsey's patience wears thin as he realizes how deeply in denial Karen is. He tells her outright that he refuses to sleep in the room because it is unsafe. He goes so far as to say that she is not doing anything right and that he cannot help turn the inn around if she continues to ignore the real issues.
I am not sleeping in this dump.
As he prepares to leave, he notices a sign marked office. Karen informs him that this is her private quarters. Frustrated, Chef Ramsey tells her that running the inn in this manner is unacceptable. At this point, Karen breaks down in tears. It becomes clear that Chef Ramsey's harsh words have finally hit home. She realizes that she has been in denial about the true state of the inn and that something needs to change if they hope to keep the business running. The encounter serves as a wake-up call for Karen, who now understands that her neglect and refusal to face reality have brought the inn to the brink of disaster. Chef Ramsey's visit to the River Rock Inn in Milford, Pennsylvania, revealed a chaotic situation marked by severe mismanagement and neglect. The owner, Ken Pisciotta, had found himself drowning in debt, owing hundreds of thousands of dollars. In a desperate attempt to keep the inn afloat, Ken had even sold his own house and moved into one of the rooms at the inn, effectively living there rent-free. This arrangement was an indication of how dire the situation had become, and it set the stage for the many problems that Chef Ramsey would soon uncover.
I know, I don't mind getting stuck in. Wow.
Upon his arrival, Chef Ramsey immediately noticed the lack of a warm welcome. There was no one at the reception, and he had to search around the inn to find someone to greet him. When he finally encountered assistant innkeeper Karen, the disarray was evident. Ramsey was shocked to see the condition of her desk, cluttered and unprofessional, and this first impression did not bode well for what lay ahead.
Just check my view. Ugh, look at all those bugs.
As Karen showed Chef Ramsey to his room, she spoke about the inn's supposed historical charm, claiming it was built in the 1880s. Chef Ramsey sarcastically quipped that it looked like the decorations hadn't been updated since then. His room was in poor condition. The closet was crammed with hangers and extra carpets, and he soon discovered something even more disgusting, a musty, foul odor permeating the air. As he inspected further, Chef Ramsey found an awkwardly placed chair in the corner, which Karen said had the best Wi-Fi signal, highlighting the haphazard nature of the inn's amenities. Trying to lift his spirits, Chef Ramsey decided to watch some TV, only to find that the television didn't work properly, adding to his frustration. By the end of the day, Chef Ramsey was thoroughly unimpressed with the state of his room. He was hesitant to sleep in the bed, fearing the cleanliness of the sheets and the mattress. To his horror, when he peeled back the covers, he found stains that suggested the sheets hadn't been properly laundered in some time. The mattress was old, lumpy, and stained, a clear indication that it was unfit for guests.
Oh, Jesus.
Thankfully, Chef Ramsey had brought a sleeping bag, possibly learning from past experiences, and he opted to use it instead of the bed, preferring not to take any chances with the unsanitary conditions. The following morning, Ramsey's troubles continued when he tried to take a shower.
Look at this thing. Oh, fuck me.
The water pressure was abysmal, and the temperature fluctuated wildly. Frustrated, he called a meeting with the inn's staff and guests to discuss the myriad issues he had encountered. The guests echoed Ramsey's concerns, complaining about malfunctioning bath drains, low shower heads, the presence of insects, and uncomfortable beds with hard springs. None of them expressed any interest in returning to the inn, citing the poor conditions and lack of proper maintenance. Chef Ramsey then showcased the stains on the mattresses to the assembled group, and the sight left everyone disgusted. The staff, particularly Karen, seemed embarrassed but not surprised, while the guests were visibly horrified. It became clear that Ken's neglect and lack of proper management had driven the inn into the ground. His decision to prioritize his own comfort by living at the inn rent-free rather than investing in the business to improve guest experience was a clear example of his misplaced priorities. By the end of his stay, Chef Ramsey was convinced that the River Rock Inn was in desperate need of a complete overhaul. The lack of professionalism, poor maintenance, and unsanitary conditions were driving away guests and damaging the inn's reputation. It was evident that unless Ken Pisciotta made significant changes to his approach and management style, the future of the River Rock Inn looked bleak. Ramsey's visit was a wake-up call, but whether Ken would heed it remained uncertain. Chef Ramsey's visit to Curtis House Inn in Woodbury, Connecticut, showcased one of the more bizarre and troubling hotel experiences in the first season of Hotel Hell. Curtis House Inn, the oldest inn in Connecticut, has been in operation since 1736. The Hardesty family had managed the inn for nearly 6 decades, and at the time of Chef Ramsey's visit, siblings Chris Hardesty and TJ Brennan represented the 4th generation in charge. However, the inn's decline had created a rift between the siblings, severely affecting both the business and their relationship. Upon arrival, Chef Ramsey was initially impressed by the inn's charming exterior. However, this positive impression was short-lived. As he approached the entrance, he was immediately disappointed by the inn's sign, which was faded and uninviting, a possible indication of what was to come. Inside, the situation was even worse. Chef Ramsey was surprised to learn that he was the only guest booked for the night, and the inn seemed eerily empty. He was greeted by Shirley at the reception, who informed him that he had arrived 4 hours early for the standard 3 p.m. check-in time. To his disbelief, Ramsey learned there was a $10 per hour surcharge for early check-in. Chef Ramsey found this policy ridiculous and a clear sign of poor customer service. Frustrated but maintaining his sense of humor, Chef Ramsey decided to lie down on a couch in the reception area, covering himself with a blanket as a joke about the check-in surcharge.
Gordon! This isn't really appropriate.
However, Shirley did not find the joke amusing and was visibly unamused by his antics. This awkward exchange set the tone for what would be a bizarre and frustrating stay. Things took a spooky turn when Shirley finally checked Chef Ramsey into his room, informing him that he was staying in room 16, which allegedly had a permanent resident, a ghost named Betty. When Chef Ramsey entered the room, he was immediately struck by the poor conditions. The pillowcase had a stain that suspiciously resembled a footprint, dust was everywhere, and dead insects were scattered across the room. Just when he thought he had seen it all, the room threw another surprise at him. As he inspected the lock on the door, it jammed, temporarily trapping him inside.
Yeah. Honestly, it must be the bloody ghost.
Chef Ramsey couldn't help but wonder if Betty the ghost was playing tricks on him. The inn's management practices were just as outdated and disturbing as the physical condition of the rooms. At the front desk, Chef Ramsey noticed that his credit card information had been written down in a physical book that was easily accessible to anyone who walked by. This breach of security and lack of privacy was alarming, and yet another sign of the inn's mismanagement. As the day progressed, Chef Ramsey's patience wore thin. The poor state of the rooms and the inn's bizarre practices prompted him to confront Chris Hardesty and TJ Brennan about their management style and the inn's declining state. The siblings, however, were too caught up in their personal conflicts to focus on the inn's problems. Chris and TJ's strained relationship was evident in their constant bickering and inability to agree on anything, which had directly contributed to the neglect of the business.
It's you. Okay. My house.
Chef Ramsey's frustrations were compounded by Chris's and TJ's unwillingness to take responsibility for the inn's decline. Both seemed more interested in blaming each other than finding solutions to improve the inn's conditions. Ramsey pointed out the numerous issues: poor customer service, lack of cleanliness, and an overall sense of neglect. He emphasized that these problems were driving away guests and damaging the inn's reputation. By the end of his stay, it was clear to Chef Ramsey that the Curtis House Inn was a ghost of its former self, both literally and figuratively. The inn's historic charm had been overshadowed by poor management, outdated practices, and a complete lack of attention to detail. If the Hardesty family wanted to keep the inn running, they would need to put aside their differences and work together to address the numerous problems plaguing the establishment. Chef Ramsey's visit was a wake-up call for the siblings to focus on the inn's future rather than their personal issues, or risk becoming another failed hotel in hotel hell. In another unforgettable episode, Ramsey visits the Roosevelt Inn in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. At first glance, the inn appears charming, a quaint bed and breakfast housed in a historic old-school building. The exterior, with its picturesque views and classic architecture, suggests a warm, welcoming retreat. However, it doesn't take long for Chef Ramsey to discover that beneath its inviting facade, the Roosevelt Inn is a sinking ship, weighed down by deep financial troubles and an owner who seems oblivious to the severity of the situation.
I hope I'll get a sense of what's really going on here from John's wife, Tina.
Gordon, this is my lovely wife.
The inn is run by John Huff, a former schoolteacher turned innkeeper, and his wife Tina, who was pulled away from her career in a dental office to help run the business. Tina's daughter, Lorian, also helps out, but it is clear from the start that the family is struggling to keep things afloat. John, however, is in complete denial about the dire state of their finances and the condition of the inn. This disconnect becomes a recurring theme throughout Chef Ramsey's visit.
So, you bought the hotel?
It was my negotiation.
From the moment he arrives, Chef Ramsey begins to see red flags. The first comes during a meeting with Tina, who confides that buying the inn was an impulsive decision made by John. She had no say in the matter. One day, John came home and simply announced that they now owned an inn. For Tina, the news was a complete shock, and ever since, it has been a source of tension and stress. They spent $700,000 to purchase the Roosevelt Inn, and now they are drowning in debt, owing a staggering $1.1 million. They've had to sell their house, cash in their $401,000, and now they are living in the attic of the inn. The situation is clearly dire, and Tina is feeling immense pressure. John, on the other hand, seems to be living in another world.
We sold our house we had here.
Cashed in a 401k, everything we had.
When Chef Ramsey meets with John, he is taken aback by how casual and unbothered the man seems. As Tina talks about the sacrifices they've made and the strain this inn has put on their marriage, John is sitting there smiling and laughing as if they're discussing the weather. Chef Ramsey can't understand how John can be so nonchalant when their financial situation is so precarious. They're on the brink of losing everything, but John acts like it's no big deal.
Financial hardship, everything's just falling apart here for me.
The more Chef Ramsey digs, the more he realizes that John's attitude isn't just frustrating, it's downright dangerous. John doesn't seem to grasp the gravity of the situation at all, and even when Tina reveals that they've had to go to counseling to try and save their marriage, John just chuckles, treating the entire predicament like it's some kind of adventure. Chef Ramsey is stunned by John's lack of seriousness. He's met plenty of delusional owners in his time, but John takes the cake. As Chef Ramsey continues his assessment of the Roosevelt Inn, he uncovers more issues. The decor is outdated and mismatched, reflecting John's peculiar taste more than it does a coherent design theme. The rooms are cluttered and cleanliness is questionable. The breakfast, which should be the highlight of a bed and breakfast experience, is subpar, made with cheap ingredients and lacking in flavor. Chef Ramsey is appalled by the lack of attention to detail and quality in the services provided. Determined to make John understand the reality of their situation, Chef Ramsey confronts him directly, trying to shake him out of his complacency. He points out that they're not just playing house here. This is their livelihood, their future, and they're on the verge of losing it all. But John just laughs it off, insisting that things aren't as bad as they seem.
It is kind of an entertainment, though, to a certain degree.
He even goes as far as to say that he still enjoys running the inn, despite the mountain of debt and the strain it's put on his family. Chef Ramsey is nearly at a loss for words. How can someone be so blind to reality? How can John sit there and laugh while his wife is practically in tears, worried sick about their future?
It'll be my job this evening to cook your dinner.
So while John gets to play Sherlock Holmes.
To further illustrate the inn's problems, Chef Ramsey invites the locals to a dinner service, hoping to get honest feedback. The meal is a disaster, poorly cooked, poorly served, and poorly received. The feedback from the locals is blunt and harsh. They would not recommend the Roosevelt Inn to anyone. The situation is a wake-up call for Tina, but John remains in his bubble, refusing to acknowledge the truth.
Stick a fork in me.
Matt.
Was it mad?
Yeah. You're in the kitchen.
The dramatic contrast between John's casual attitude and the dire circumstances they're in makes for one of the most frustrating moments Chef Ramsey has ever encountered. It's clear that John's refusal to take the situation seriously is not only hurting their business, but also their marriage. And Tina is carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, trying to keep everything together, while John is content to just coast along, blissfully ignorant of the disaster looming over them.
I just don't know what you want.
It's only your own fucking stupidity to why we're in the shit.
In the end, Chef Ramsey devises a plan to revamp the inn, giving it a much-needed facelift and a clear strategy to attract more guests. He encourages John to take things seriously, to listen to Tina, and to treat the inn like the business it is, not a hobby. However, whether John will follow through and make the necessary changes remains uncertain. By the end of the episode, it's clear that if there's any hope of saving the Roosevelt Inn, John will need to snap out of his delusion and start taking things seriously. In Season 2, Episode 5 of Ramsey visits the historic Cumed Inn in Pipestone, Minnesota, a grand old hotel that has unfortunately fallen into a state of disrepair under the ownership of two sisters, Rena and Wanda Smirkovsky. The sisters, who purchased the hotel on a whim, are the embodiment of chaos and mismanagement, transforming what could have been a charming, historic destination into a nightmare for both guests and staff alike. From the outset, it's clear that the Calumet Inn is in trouble. The problems start with the ownership. 6 weeks after taking charge, Rena left for Minneapolis for 3 months to take a break, leaving the hotel in the hands of her younger sister, Wanda. Wanda, inexperienced and seemingly uninterested in the realities of running a hotel, took charge in her own way, by sleeping in until 3 p.m. most days. This lackadaisical approach to management is just the beginning of the myriad issues Chef Ramsey encounters during his stay. Despite having no experience in hospitality, the Smirkovsky sisters were convinced they knew how to run the hotel better than anyone else. They even went so far as to strip their general manager, Mandy Thompson, of all her management duties. Mandy, the only person who seemed genuinely concerned about the hotel's future, was sidelined. This decision left the hotel without effective leadership, causing a ripple effect that impacted every aspect of the guest experience. Upon arriving at the hotel, Chef Ramsey was immediately struck by the dark, empty entrance passageway.
I wouldn't be surprised if it were mold.
Instead of being welcomed into a cozy, inviting lobby, he felt like he was walking into a prison. He had to call out for assistance, only to be met with a disorganized and lackluster reception that set the tone for the rest of his stay. As he checked in, Ramsey's skepticism grew, and it wasn't long before he discovered why the Calumet Inn was struggling.
That's moldy.
Oh man.
Once he was in his room, the state of disrepair became painfully evident. Chef Ramsey found a surprise under his mattress that would turn anyone's stomach, an old rotten banana that had been forgotten for who knows how long.
I wouldn't be surprised if it were mold.
This was just the tip of the iceberg. The room, which had supposedly been cleaned and prepared for him, was filthy, with stained carpets, dusty corners, and an unpleasant odor lingering in the air. The lack of basic cleanliness was inexcusable, and Ramsey's frustration quickly turned to anger. The reaction from other guests staying at the hotel was equally telling. They expressed disappointment and shock at the conditions, with one guest even stating that they found a disgusting surprise in their room.
Look at this. How are your allergies doing?
They're a little bit rough.
Many had similar stories of poorly maintained rooms, unprofessional staff, and an overall lack of hospitality. It was clear that the guests felt trapped in what was supposed to be a relaxing getaway, but it turned into a regrettable experience. In an attempt to understand the reasoning behind the hotel's dire state, Chef Ramsey sat down with the sisters to get their side of the story. They revealed that they had stayed at the hotel for just one night before deciding to purchase it, a decision that now seemed reckless and poorly thought out. Rena claimed she had stayed in her favorite room, prompting Ramsey to investigate it himself. However, when he checked out the room, it was in a similarly appalling state, far from the cozy sanctuary Rena had described.
Pee stains all over the disgusting wallpaper, holes in the wall here.
Ramsey could hardly believe that this was the best room the hotel had to offer. The sisters were quick to blame the hotel's problems on the staff, accusing them of being unprofessional, rude, and consistently complaining. They saw Mandy as part of the problem, which is why they removed her from her managerial duties. This finger-pointing, however, seemed more like an excuse to cover up their own incompetence and lack of leadership. As is often the case with struggling business owners, the Smirkovsky sisters failed to take responsibility for their own roles in the hotel's decline. They expected the staff to run the hotel independently, without supervision or direction, simply because they were being paid. In reality, the lack of clear management and vision from the sisters was the true root of the problem. Mandy, who genuinely cared about the hotel's future, tried to speak up about the issues, but her efforts were ignored or dismissed. She was left powerless to make any meaningful changes, resulting in a demoralized staff and a deteriorating guest experience. It was evident that the hotel's problems were not just about poor management, but also about a lack of respect and support for the employees who were expected to keep everything running smoothly. As Chef Ramsey dug deeper, he realized that the situation was far worse than he initially thought. The hotel's financial records were in disarray, basic maintenance was neglected, and the overall atmosphere was one of defeat and hopelessness. It was clear that the sisters were in over their heads, but rather than seek help or listen to advice, they remained stubbornly convinced that they knew best. Chef Ramsey wasted no time in addressing the issues head-on. He called out the sisters for their poor management and lack of experience, urging them to recognize their mistakes and start taking their responsibilities seriously. He emphasized that owning a hotel is not just about making a profit, it's about providing a positive experience for guests and creating a supportive environment for staff. Until the sisters could accept this and change their ways, the Cumed Inn would continue to suffer. By the end of the episode, it was clear that drastic changes were needed if the Cumed Inn was to have any chance of survival. Chef Ramsey's intervention served as a wake-up call for the sisters, but whether they would heed his advice and turn things around remained to be seen. The fate of the historic hotel hung in the balance, dependent on the sisters' willingness to learn, adapt, and take their roles as owners seriously. And for the guests and staff of the Cumed Inn, the hope was that this visit from Chef Ramsey would mark the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with promise and potential rather than disappointment and disarray. But which of these owners do you think was the worst? Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn on the post notifications. And if you want to watch another mind-bending video, then make sure to check out this next post right here. It's even crazier.